Philosophy family. I extend a hearty welcome to all of you for joining this Sunday webinar. Friends, you know that Philosophy family has been organizing webinars on different occasions, and during the pandemic, we have already conducted more than 190 webinars for the cause of philosophical reflection, for the cause of the students, research scholars, and the teachers of philosophy. We have also conducted webinars on different interdisciplinary subjects for the noble cause of intellectual reflection. Friends, you know, during the pandemic, we have tried to connect the teachers and students of family, the students and teachers of philosophy and other subjects to reach at the primary objective of teaching and learning philosophy and other subjects. We hope to reach the unreached through this webinar, and our attempt has been successful. Friends, today we have invited Professor Seshadri, the former Associate Professor and Head, Department of Philosophy, Guru Nanak Khalsa College, Mumbai, to our webinar. It's my honor and pride privilege to welcome such a towering personality of our country. Today, he will speak on the spiritualism, human relation, and personal ethics. This is a very new topic for all of us. It happens to relate spirituality, the role of spirituality in ethics and ethical behavior in different situations of her life. And before inviting him to speak on the scheduled topic, let me express a few words on his academic pursuits. Friends, Professor Seshadri, born, educated and settled in Mumbai. Professor Seshadri did his MA in English, MA in Philosophy, and Diploma in Higher Education from the University of Mumbai. Professor Seshadri retired as Vice Principal, Associate Professor, and studied Philosophy from Guru Nanak Khalsa College, Mumbai. And during his teaching career, he has many contributions to the college in every field. Professor Seshadri was acting as the chairman of the Board of Studies in Logic and Philosophy, member of the Academic Council, Faculty of Arts and Board Examinations, University of Mumbai for a term of 3 years. Professor Seshadri has been executed different activities, different administrative works whenever it was given to him. Professor Seshadri has a 37 years of teaching experience both in UG and PG levels. He has a teaching experience in UG level and teaching experience in PG level also. Professor Seshadri retired in November 2008. Professor Seshadri initiated several workshops. He is a man of creativity. He has organized and he has conducted and executed successfully many workshops for teachers in updating the syllabus at all levels and implemented the revised syllabus. And Professor Seshadri was also a research person for different topics in the university. Professor Seshadri delivered many endowment lectures in different sessions of Indian Philosophical Council and ABDP, and he was also an active participant in different national and international seminars. He was also acting as a speaker in different symposium and different forums, and also he also acted as a sectional president in different state level and national level seminars. Professor Seshadri presented different papers, many papers at local, national, and international seminars, of which all the papers have been published in the national and international journals. So today we are very grateful to Professor Seshadri that he has agreed to be with us today to speak on the scheduled topic. I welcome Professor Seshadri to our webinar. I also welcome all the teachers of philosophy across the country, all the scholars of philosophy across the country to be connected with this virtual platform. And today, we think Professor Seshadri's speech will be very benefited to all of us. And on this occasion, I also extend my welcome to Professor Pramod Kumar Das. He is hosting the webinar. He is the admin of the philosophy family. I welcome him. I also welcome Professor Dr. K. Omnaran Rao. Today, he will be interacting with you in the question and answer session. He is the co-admin of philosophy family. I welcome him. With this, I also welcome all the senior teachers of philosophy who are connected with us. I can see the faces of Professor Ranjit Ghosh, Professor Rishi Singh, and other professors on the screen. I bow down my head before them because today they have glorified us by attending the webinar. Once again, I welcome all and request Professor Seshadri to commence his speech. Welcome to Professor Seshadri. Pranam, sir.
Greetings and namaskar to all the people who are on the screen. I can see some familiar faces here, and there are people who are senior to me, elder to me, people who are junior to me, and people who are of my same age. My greetings and namaskar to all of them. This topic that I have chosen now, I just wanted 3 or 4 sentences about this. The last few months, about 16 months since the pandemic began, I have been taken back to my childhood when I was in my 2nd and 3rd standard when India faced the plague epidemic, and we see so many people dying. And at that moment, as children, we lived without fear. In fact, my first visit to crematorium was with my father when I was about less than 7 years old. And I don't know why, when I look back, today people are scared of any disease. The pandemic has taught us that, but then there was a time 60 years back when we never felt that fear in us, even though the threat of disease was there. Number 2, during this pandemic, the last 1.5 years, I witnessed, in fact, some of them were close to me dying. I also witnessed one phenomenon, and that is people who are totally unrelated, people who are not connected, people who never saw each other came down on the streets to help others or help in many other ways by connecting with them through intermediaries without having the occasion to meet them. This made me think about what is it that we have lost in the last 300 years due to industrialization and the kind of new values that have come in. It made me re-examine the kind of values we have. At the same time, why it is necessary for us to modify our own personal ethics in the light of what is happening around us. One occasion was in the month of April. I happened to write a small article for one of the journals which has been published in the month of May, and it was about moving beyond the pandemic. And in that paper, I just visualized the kind of spiritualism that people should have in order to overcome any difficult moment in life. And when Professor Das and Professor Rao called me to speak, I thought I will take up this topic and extend my views. This for the benefit of all. It is possible that by this interaction, I get to learn something. I want to pass on something that I know so that others also get helped. My paper follows three different structures. One is, why do we live the kind of life that we live, where values come in? What exactly is relation and what kind of relation should we have with others? The third part is spiritualism and how it can influence our conduct in developing relationships. That's what I have done. And I wish to bring in the fact that I am to a great extent influenced by my teachers and my friends more than my family in this. I begin. All human beings live because there are some fundamental values to live by. And what are these values? We want to be happy, happiness. We want to realize beauty in our life, as much perfection as possible or excellence. We want to realize truth as a goal of life. We want peace and security, among other things. We want welfare, we want safety, we want freedom, we want justice. We are born in a society or in a family with certain endowments. And we are responsible for providing an ideal legacy to the future generations. So that also becomes a part of our value system. And at the same time, all these values have an impact on the way we look out of our world, look into the world, look with the world, and look at the world that we want to have. It influences our attitudes. What has happened the last 200 to 300 years post-industrial revolution and the so-called post-modern times is that there have been a lot of changes in our life and the life of society, community, and it has taken a toll on our intellectual, professional, commercial, family and social, as well as cultural and recreational fields. Today, the most important value that people attach themselves to is money. If not the most important, it's the most preferred value. As much money as possible, because money gives position, it is defined by position, it gives privileges, it gives certain advantages over the others. So money becomes a fundamental value, which was not the case when we were small. We were not brought up like that. But I am not going to deny the modern millennials their reason for doing so. I will not deny that. The other is, as much success, as much achievement, as much possessions, as much as possible within the shortest possible time, in the belief that time and tide wait for no man, which is true, but whether that only should be the principle guiding us. The third is, we are not living the kind of life that we want to live, fully free. Our life is very much governed by a mechanized program that comes from outside, where we are expected to fit in. And it starts not from when you start your working life, which used to be. It starts right from the time a child is born. By the time the child is 2, the child is sent to play school or nursery or sub-junior, whatever name you call it. And then there's a time that is fixed, and that decides the time how the family finds itself in as far as dealing with its own members is concerned. So there's a timetable that is forced on us from outside. There is a timetable that we have to work within outside, and everyone is expected to fit in with, because there is only one goal. Money plays a vital role in this. Money must be made for everyone's good. When you come to this point, we begin to wonder, why do we not have the kind of social relations, personal relations that we used to have? And at the same time, why are most people living what I call a fragmented life? There is a life even within the house, relationship among parents, among siblings, among parents and children and grandparents. I think there is a great deviation as far as everyone's personal, social, family life, working life, professional life, cultural life is concerned. The new term that is coined now is what is called social engineering. There was nothing like a planned social engineering or deliberate social engineering institutions taught us. But today, we are the only people. Please remember, man is the only one who can philosophize. No other animal can. Number 2, that gives us the capacity to retrospect, introspect, and prospect, the ability to choose, to decide, and to act, and work within a framework of context and common sense, competition, and compassion, all of which calls us to revisit the idea of people as persons, not as human beings. That quantum models throughout us. What I'm trying to say is this I have taken from Professor Atul Bilgrami's lecture at the University of Bombay about 10 years back, and where he said that the whole concept of looking at human beings has undergone a change because nobody is looked upon as a human being first. They are only looked upon as persons. The shift is from human beings to persons, and that is the result of the kind of relations that we establish. Why do we need to look at this? Because number one, man has a value. Man, in fact, only has a value. All other things. This is one of the principles that modern society works on. Everything around us, nature, resources, human resources, material resources, all kinds of resources, all kinds of things that are available to us from nature, from our surroundings. All these are secondary. All other living and non-living things are secondary, subordinated, subservient to human desires and goals. Knowledge to live in and with nature, and knowledge to own and exploit nature. We are no more trustees of nature. We don't want to share what is there in nature. Nature has, as Buddhism says, Teshwan says, everything to give, but we want to take over everything and utilize it to our own benefit. The reason is the syndrome of money is what money does, and money makes man. So keep multiplying money within the shortest possible time. And this means a no holds barred attempt where ends justify the means. And what happens? Human dignity is lost. We all get dehumanized. So as rational intellectuals and not as ideologues, we have to focus on some workable norms or principles of human relations. That brings me to ethics. I come now to relation and relationship. A relation is not the same as a relationship, though there are similarities between the two. A relation is a connection between any two entities. These entities can be persons, objects, things, dogmas, beliefs, etc. in a positive or a negative sense. For instance, when I say I know someone, it is just that I have some information about that person or the person under reference. This is in the sense of being positive. Some relations are born out of necessity, say like getting a job or getting a work done. I have to be necessarily related with my colleagues, my office bosses, my assistants. Mostly a relation is thrust on us, like in a family, for example. The so-called relations are normally either blood relations or otherwise. I have to deal with my colleagues and so-called live in the course of my life, whether I like it or not. It may be something like playing to the gallery because society expects it. If I say I do not know somebody, it means that I neither not know that person or I probably have some information about him or no information about him which I find not worthy of it. This is in a negative sense. But not having a relation is also a kind of relation. In every relation, there is a definite context and there is always a time factor location. There is a place for it and there are goals, and it's always a one-way movement and not necessarily reciprocal. Once the goal is achieved, you find that the relation ceases. In Bombay Hindi, in Mumbai Hindi, the local dialect of Hindi, it is called matlabi sambandh. ये आदमी कोई चीज है, बस मतलब की है. That means I am only interested in that person as far as I can use the principle of use and throw and hire and fire, in the sense of hire when needed, fire when redundant. That means it is not an enduring relation. It is not something that continues forever or for a longer period of time. because it lacks a permanent commitment from either side, both the subject and the object of the relation. It will be realistic for all practical purposes, but I cannot call it an asset that we value because it's a working relationship, if at all it is one, and does not allow itself to be extended to context other than the work at hand. Whereas a relationship has all the positive aspects that relation has, but goes beyond these. It is reciprocal between the two entities that are related, and the relation takes on a new meaning and scope and continues to exist even after the goals are achieved. That is, it is not only one activity oriented. It is a multiplicity and series of activities where the interconnectedness continues and adds meaning to that relation. The movement from one to the other neither dissipates nor depreciates with time and distance, for it involves, exhibits, and encourages conscious efforts to add value to the relationship. Its meaning and value rises in direct proportion to the commitment, and please note the mutual regard and respect that the subject and the object have for each other. That is, the two entities in a relationship are mutually committed to each other. They mutually contribute to each other, and there is no end to that relationship. It can go on for a lifetime. That is not the case in the case of a relation. Why is this relationship? Why a relation should become a relationship? It is because a good relationship, there is nothing like a bad relationship, but sometimes relationships fail. Therefore, I have chosen to use the word a good relationship is a stimulus for the overall growth of an individual's personality as well as character. We come across mental wrecks, we come across drug addicts, alcoholics, people who say they are born failures. The reason is they are people who fail to distinguish between the relation and the relationship, or they were not discreet or circumspect about the conditions, context, purpose, and consequences of the relationship. Today, there is a new concept called live-in relationship. I don't know whether it can be really called a relationship, whatever may be the common interests that they have. I have my doubt about it. But the fact is, if it is a true relationship, it has got to be enduring throughout one's life. People may come, people may go. We all had friends from our childhood, during school, college days. We may not meet every one of them now, but please note that relationship continues even now with at least some of them. So it is very important, when there are parents who are good to their children, children who are good to their parents, that relationship never, ever fails. But if it is the other way, neither parents were good, nor children were good, there can be no relationship. So what I'm trying to say is that a relationship to be meaningful, irrespective of one's conditions, circumstances, has to have some element of permanence, a degree of permanence that makes that relation continue to exist and adds meaning to that. Oh no, what is it? Somebody must please unmute. Somebody must. Am I audible now?
Yes, sir. Fine. Okay, sir. Fine.
Please remember, nothing in this universe is without a purpose. And all of us, every one of us, is a part of this huge wheel called the universe. And every unit has certain functions to perform, some purpose to serve. Aristotle called it the highest degree of perfection, eudaimon. That our capacities, endowments will permit us to reach. For the theists, it is God realization. For Vedantins, it is self-realization. For the Buddhists, it is nirvana or nibbana. For the materialists, it is just living this life with the best of everything. Enjoy this life with all the happiness, pleasure that is possible. I am using the word pleasure and happiness together as equivalent, but I feel that is different. The way we connect with those around us depends on what we choose to do with whoever and whatever we have in our life. What I want to say is, What I want to say is that whether an individual is a believer in God or not, is an idealist or a pragmatist, is immaterial to the goal of achieving a higher or a better standard of living or superior quality of life. Only metaphysics or religion cannot put bread into the tummy. I am not in favor of people talking about spiritualism to an empty tummy. Even a man who suffers hunger and starvation, poverty, suffering, he cannot think of God, spiritualism, anything. First, his basic needs to survive will have to be fulfilled. But the web of human relationships is very important to make some meaning out of the gift called life. I may say the very fundamental component of our values and goals, our methods and strategies to augment a life of quality. This brings me to what relationship means. I have taken this from the internet, 4 statements. Number 1, to help without hesitation, to give without expectation, to love without limitation, and to remember even without communication. I repeat, to help without hesitation, to give without expectation. Yesterday, Professor Das was speaking on Nishkam, what is that? Sthita Prajna. And I was noting that. To do our duty without expectation of any reward. To love without limitation. Be generous. Open your heart to everyone. To remember beyond without a communication. Many people, are very particular about being remembered. And if somebody doesn't greet you on a particular occasion, no, you didn't wish me that day. You didn't greet me. I think that is immaterial. People who love and respect you will always remember you. There is no need for a particular day to be remembered. And I want to add one more thing, and that is to keep as many people as happy for no apparent reason or specific reason except that it is good for anyone whether you know or you don't. The Dalai Lama in his book, The Art of Happiness, says that happiness is everyone's right. And everyone must be able to enjoy that right fully. But does this mean that relation has no value? Every relation may be useful, but not always meaningful. And if at all so, it will be limited to an extent, in a limited context. It will probably be within what we call our comfort zone, tolerance level, or what we call a good company. But beyond that, it remains mostly one way and rarely goes beyond the context. The sentiment in a relation is one of respect for a person by virtue of the office he or she holds for the time being. It turns foggy as time passes. That's not the case with a relationship. A relationship is always a matter of choice. And I have the freedom to select or decide on the object or the entity with which I want a concrete, meaningful connect because my reason justifies it, supports it, welcomes it. Please note, I use the word we have to choose the kind of relationship we have and the object of that relationship. Here where ethics come in. My higher autonomous consciousness comes into play. After all, my choices define me as a person. I am not by the company I keep. And I need to be in the company of dignified human beings who will add qualitative value to my life and I can reciprocate so that they too benefit. It's a two-way, not a one-way, and continues to endure and enrich the quality of life by not merely living both. So relationship is superior to a relation in that it is unconditional and a sentiment of reverence attached to it and continues to be so unabated by the flow of time. So to summarize relationship, I'll just mention certain points. Relationship is mostly one way. Relation is mostly one way. Relationship always two way. Reciprocal. Relation formal, contractual, customary. Relationship informal, spontaneous. Relation is defined by position, designation. Relationship is defined by person, character. Hierarchy limits walk the talk possibility in relation. Hierarchy encourages walk the talk possibility in relationship because it follows the principle of freedom and mutuality. In a relation, there is a limited objective where the mind and body comes in. In relationship, there are infinite possibilities because it is mind and body plus consciousness. Relationship demands respect, obedience. Relationship does not demand but involves reverence, admiration. There is no force in it. Relationship means conditional trust, hide and seek. There is apprehension and there is something of the fear. What will happen? You get scared. Whereas in relationship, there is absolute trust, so there is transparency, there is faith, but no fear. Relation means as good as it gets, therefore momentary, and sometimes it is dehumanizing. Relationship is always good, lifelong, pro-humanizing. In relation, traction ceases when the objective is achieved. In relationship, traction replenishes and widens with every interaction. When you talk of the Guru-Shishya Parampara, you find it is a relationship, it's not a relation. Whereas if we talk of teachers and students, it is mostly a relation, not a relationship. Very few go beyond that. I'll come to that when I conclude. A relation, once ceases, may be revived, but it will be conditional. Whereas relationship, once the trust is lost, there is no question of revival, but that happens very rarely. I now come to the axiomatic principles of relationship. This, I think all of us will have to follow. I have only listed some of them, but I find it very important. Give respect when deserved, when it is deserved. Take respect when it is due. Be humble, contented and happy. Mankind is greater than individuals. We cannot do anything to satisfy our own ego. We have to see that there is a humanity that is outside. I own nothing that I inherit or acquire. I am only a co-trustee and co-traveler in this momentary world. Nature or God is infinite. Humility is a virtue of the wise, just as boisterousness is a quality of the ignorant. We say people whose top is empty make the empty vessels make maximum noise. That's not the case with the wise people. A peaceful world of harmonious existence is possible with trusted relationships among societies and cultures. Henry Sidgwick says, humility is not just obtaining pleasure in my own respect and admiration. It is a disposition in favor of fellow men and the willing submission to God, to the Guru. It reminds man of his imperfection, and in finitude takes off his pride. Why do we need ideal relationships? Please note, all conflicts arise due to negative view of people, principles, objects, and issues, arising from ego and possessiveness, which spring from position and power that one has acquired or is endowed with. When the power of ego is misdirected, we suffer undue exploitation, object poverty, which is a breeding ground for crimes, and we have instances like Nirbhaya. Many of you know about it. Sometimes we have to eat our words, swallow our pride, and accept that we are wrong. This is what the most difficult thing is. We don't accept, even though we know we are wrong, we are not prepared to accept that we are wrong. If we are humble, we will accept that we are wrong. It is not giving up or surrendering. It is growing up, getting matured by the wisdom of experience and understanding. If I say that I know everything, I am always right, there is no question of learning anything more. If I am always right, everyone else is wrong. That way the world cannot go on. We cannot live like that. We need to reorient our secular attitude and go beyond faith or religion. And we not only have to tolerate, tolerance is not the word for it, we have to respect and accept others' faith, others' beliefs, other professional, other social, moral, and personal merits of individuals. We need to do that. It is going beyond the political, economic, religious ethic framework and accept what I call the personhood of all, the equality of all in all aspects of life. That means concern for living as well as non-living beings, and that means going beyond oneself to love mankind, doing good at every opportunity for the benefit of everyone as much as possible. It is here that spiritualism has an important role to play. I'll be talking about what spiritualism does. It leads to what you call expansion of consciousness, leading to self-awareness of what's going on and what could be in store. This awareness is very important. It goes beyond now and here, beyond the given. It develops positivity, guiding the objective, progressive movement towards the anticipated desired goal. The spirit to raise oneself to a higher plane of existence and experience, where there is awareness of oneness between the perceiver and the perceived, between the subject and the object, a bridge, a connect of I, you as part of a general or universal whole. I have to think myself as part of the universal whole and not in my small, limited world that I live in. Swami Vivekananda had said in his address in 1893 at Chicago, religion of universal brotherhood and all human beings, irrespective of any other consideration, take a person as what he or she is, not what he or she I expect to be. That's all. I cannot compare everyone with myself. Others cannot compare me with them. Yes, there can be comparison, points of interest, points of merits and demerits. But the fact is, you are what you are, I am what I am, he or she is what he or she is, respectively. And I must respect that. That's what I mean by recognizing the personhood of individuals. Dr. Ambedkar had spoken about a society free from fatalism, selfishness, and hatred. What is spiritual? Or it is higher than religious activities. Spiritual goes beyond religion. Mere religiosity is not spirituality. Many people confuse between spiritualism and religiosity. That's not the case. Nor is it an adjunct of daily routine, but it is inherent to a productive daily life. It is an attitude. It is an inherent value that we have. A higher plane of existence raises up a level of thinking and understanding to a more mature and critical format. It's very difficult because for many people going to that level is very difficult, but we can make a try. It comes by trial and habit. The contractual trust in a relation, contractual in code, trust in a relation-oriented framework could lead to a formidable sense of success, satisfaction and achievement. But it is doubtful if the level of trust and confidence is foolproof when there are failures. Whereas in absolute faith, trust and surrender in a relationship-oriented framework, it would lead to an absolute sense of fulfillment that is qualitatively superior. At every interaction, every encounter, it leads to a higher level. Failures are lessons, and the confidence and the effort to succeed gets reinforced till the ultimate object is achieved. Man need not, let us not confuse spiritual with religion, I said, man need not and man cannot be God. But there is always some scope to imbibe something of the divine personality to guide his actions. As Jainism says, Buddhism says, one need not be God. But the qualities that associate with God, I think some of us, at least most of us, can imbibe to an extent. That comes by looking within, looking at oneself through the spiritual mirror. Spiritualism does not seek everyone to be a saint, nor is everyone expected to be a saint. But an element of saintly virtues provides a degree and semblance of sanity to human mind, thought, and action. By saint, I don't mean the kind of babas and the kind of modern day gurus who are rolling around all over the place and some of them land up in jail. I don't refer to them at all. I am talking of true acharyas, dedicated acharyas. Spiritualism is not a buyable or tradable commodity. The only way it can manifest is as seva or service for those who really need help. In Sikhism, for example, we talk of Miri and Piri. We talk of material strength and spiritual strength coming together. That results in service. It's a unique mode within every individual, a latent capacity, and all it needs is for the individual to explore. It cannot be copied, but may be guided by individual enlightened spiritual master. Since a spiritual mind, why a spiritual master? The spiritual mind cannot think of discriminating and being inclusive for anyone who is keen on it and has the inclination. It becomes a base for a humanistic society, reorienting one's personal consciousness towards a more peaceful, perfect existence with ideal interpersonal relationships. Man needs to continually look within to progress. Man can transform all his resources, skills, and energies for being more responsible in his conduct than for personal gratification. At the spiritual level, life takes on a new meaning and direction by making man realize that he cannot always be the measure of all things. What the Sophists said, man cannot be that. That is what spiritualism teaches us. An enlightened soul is wiser and stronger than an intelligent mind. A world that is also spiritual is better than that is purely materialistic, egoistic. How does personal ethics come? I am coming to that. Always maintain your personal integrity, moral rectitude, and transparency of character and conduct. This is what we expect a true guru to be, not the gurus who market themselves. Never allow your personal dignity, self-respect, individuality, and benevolence to be liquidated or exploited. Please note, it's a two-way traffic. The guru knows his Shishya. The Shishya knows his guru, and both of them know how to contribute to each other. It's not exploitation of the elder over the junior. Never abrogate others' dignity and self-respect. Please note, never to dehumanize or humiliate anybody. I can never be happy at the cost of others or by encroaching on others' entitlements or their right to be happy. How does spiritual energize you? How to strengthen you? Not to give up, but to be patient and constructive, to be hopeful, to be self-confident that transformation is possible. Life is worth being celebrated in a hermitage or in a house. How? Make it a home where my happiness and others' happiness are unique in themselves without any unnecessary noise. I don't have to parade my happiness. I don't know to make a show of my happiness. I don't need to compare my happiness with anybody else's happiness. So long as it is not harmful to anybody, it doesn't rob anyone's right to be happy, so long as it is healthy for everyone around you. In today's world, everyone who is someone is running, racing, leaping to fill it and fit in everything under the sun in 23 out of 24 hours. But time and tide don't look at who they strike with fury and when and where. And we tend to fume at the world, blaming anyone and anything except ourselves. We need to learn, despite all our qualifications and competence, to live a life of contentment as long as we live, not enjoy every day and spend sleepless nights. Aurobindo talks, yes, I have a quotation from him, I quote, "The only hope of the future is the spiritualized religion of humanity, with its aim of recreating human society in the image of the ideals of liberty, equality, and fraternity, becoming the inner law of life, that is, respect everyone for what he or she is." I said earlier that we all live a fragmented life. On that, I have a counter. Living in peace, P-E-A-C-E, is real living and worth it. Not living in pieces, P-A-E-C-E is what I referred to earlier as living a fragmented life. And for that, our thought process need to pierce the temporal plane, let go of the disruptive excess baggage of the past, and let reason provide clarity of thought and action. The load we carry should be within the confines of our capacity and ability. I just want to mention one thing. Many times we find some spiritual people saying that we must be forgiving. Forgiveness is an important element. It has got forgiveness. I have my reservations on this because they say forgiveness adds to one's spiritual life. Forgiveness has different dimensions: judicial, religious, community, demographic, and so on. It also has a personal dimension because, as the Buddha says, forgiveness doesn't excuse their behavior, the one who you forgive. Forgiveness prevents their behavior from destroying your heart. So by forgiving, you are keeping your mind free. Your heart is de-burdened of that weight. But I have a qualification to this. It will be definitely foolishness if, I say foolishness, if it doesn't happen, as we will still have hardened criminals in the case of Nirbhaya. We have to be clear about imperatives and options. Who and when and how one can forgive and who can be forgiven. I think this remains a question of debate. How does spiritualism guide our personal ethics? A spiritual being helps us to unclutter our mind, has an all-embracing sense of and concern for humanity at large. Proper social and cultural orientation is necessary to humanize mankind. A better society with more human beings can be established if we accept that proper relationships matter, so that there is no need to destroy any form of life to just enjoy life. We can differ without being disrespectful. We can make a point without making an enemy, and everyone gets to carry on peacefully with his own normal routine. Our ethics should be to live as men and women of character and contentment without having to be the apple of others' eyes, not to play to the gallery, not to win favors, not to please anybody. Segregated life arises from the tendency to be judgmental about without knowing. I repeat, segregated life arises from the tendency to be judgmental without knowing others' predicaments and alternatives. A contented life, not a satisfied one, is a happy life. Happiness has a unique characteristic. The more you share, the more it multiplies. The ethic of sharing and caring is a matter of choice and not a difficult one to decide on. It means accounting and auditing our relationships rationally. We talk of audit of finances, audit of companies, audit of education. We talk of audit of happiness. I think we should talk of auditing our relationship. A holistic view of oneself and others with reason presiding over emotion and sentiment is the way forward to add value to our life and make others valuable too. Many moments of contentment, not only satisfaction, means continuity of happiness, realization of the meaning of life. How do we account for our relationships? When spiritualism powers a relation, it develops into a relationship where respect increases and transforms to reverence, which is a nobler emotion and continues to grow and widen with its own inherent energy. Knowing our friends, relations, and real friends, relationships, helps us in adopting an ethic of trust to guide our actions. Relationships help us to guide our actions. When it is mutual and unadulterated, we live well with goodwill and gratitude, not with ill will and hatred. Good, enduring relationships can progressively transform into assets to promote responsible individuals and a humanized society. I don't know how many minutes I have now. Swami Chinmayananda, as a child, during school days when I was about 10 years old, Swami Chinmayananda used to have two sessions, the place where I lived, in the playground on Bhagavad Gita. Every day there used to be a lecture on one chapter. I am going back to the 60s. And in one such session, we used to play Chor Police around the Maidan. And I heard him give an example of a squirrel and how that squirrel stores the seeds, the herbs, the nuts, picks up from various places and leaves them in a hole or a tree wherever it wants to hide, but it forgets about it. It does that job and goes to a hole on a tree, lives there for days together. It's not able to come. But then Chinmayananda says, keep this seed that is somewhere stored on other trees, grown wherever. They also are consumed by other living beings, other animals. And part of that falls to the ground where they germinate, they sprout, and a new form of life, a new sapling comes into being. Again, it provides nutrition, it provides food for other living things. But unconsciously, unknowingly, that squirrel has done a good deed. Now, this is where relationship comes. You don't have to know the person who you help, but that person will always remember you, and you don't know how that helps comes back to you through a natural cycle, which is something that I cannot explain. How does it guide our relationship? I am coming to the last part of my talk. The millennials, as we know them, people who were born in the 80s and 90s and who are all successful professionals now, are taught so much to think of only the here and now that they burn out by their 40s or mid-40s and hardly find anything worthwhile to do thereafter. Exceptions are few and far between, and only a handful finds its own bearings to move forward. They burn out completely before they are 50. The pyramid gets too narrow and steep, and many to be kept out or kicked out of the way to go up the ladder. But as far as I am talking of my personal children, my friends with whom I lived, we competed without the thought of kicking anyone out, or competed to succeed throughout, not to just win now. The choice was clear. Right gets priority over best. And that's my personal ethic. We must always choose what is right, not what is best. The second aspect of my ethic is why we should be grateful, gratitude. I feel totally indebted and grateful to many of my teachers during my student days. They were legends of their time. I will not be able to name them because there are so many. They were legends of their time, erudite, loving, and more educators than teachers. That defined our relationship. It was a different time, a different culture after the dawn of independence. We were taught our subjects as well as trained to live the whole life at our disposal, irrespective of its timely duration and circumstance. It was not a question of life is short or long, but it was a life that is always qualitative throughout our life. We learned that relations are like the pages of a book or the chapters of a book, some in a meaningful sequence, some not. Relationship, on the other hand, is like a complete book, wherein the pages and chapters enable continuity of reading with a steady flow of the theme, and sometimes certain chapters can be reread independently too. A book has to be read as a whole to make sense. Sometimes to discover, repeatedly read it, to discover, explore the nuances hidden in the lexicon and the metaphors and similes. And the search for an enduring higher meaning or wider dimension doesn't stop with one reading. That is why those who are very familiar with the Bhagavad Gita always find you go back to that, or even the Dhammapada, you go back to that, or you go to the Adi Granth Sahib, you will find, yes, there are meanings to be discovered. I come to the last part, the conclusion. There will be always options and dilemmas as life moves forward. As a person experiences and understands the routine, existential tides and ebbs, the undercurrents and airwaves of daily life, the only imperative he or she will have is to act according to the better one among the best or worst options available at the material time. Personal values, interests, compulsions, convenience, and attitude determine the choices. And as Robert Frost had said during President Kennedy's inauguration, we have to make a choice between the trodden path and the untrodden path. The woods are lovely, dark and deep, and I have promises to keep and miles to go before I sleep, miles to go before I sleep. The untrodden one, and discover new horizons. Relations power the body and mind to act like the different organs of the body, or they are defined as per the specific situational factors. Relationships awaken the body, mind, and conscious to work together for both the specific situational factors now as well as those in the future. Within the context of the totality of life, not made to live out one's daily existence. Either we live for the day or we live throughout. I think living throughout one's life is better than living just for the day and every day. So the personal ethic for me would be to first resolve the claims between compromise and sacrifice. I believe sacrifice is higher than compromise. And some element of spiritualism helps in this. And one need not be a saint or a sinner, just a common man who is guided by reason. I conclude with three quotes. One is a small poem by, I have taken this from the internet, Spike Milligan. I just read it, it's about 8 lines. Smiling is infectious, you catch it like the flu. When someone smiled at me today, I started smiling too. I walked around the corner and someone saw me grin. When he smiled, I realized I had passed it on to him. I thought about the smile and then I realized its worth. A single smile like mine could travel around the earth. So if you feel a smile begin, don't leave it undetected. Start an epidemic and get the world infected. When you feel like smiling, spread it. Spread happiness. Don't be just happy with the fact that I am happy. Let it reach to everyone around you, even those who are at distance. Tell them you are happy, they will feel very happy. Mark von Doron, there's a quotation which I feel is very important, we as teachers. I quote, any piece of knowledge I acquire today has a value at this moment exactly proportional to in my skill to deal with it. Tomorrow when I know more, I recall that piece of knowledge and use it better. Unquote. That should be our attitude to life. And the last one, by Bernard Shaw. This I learned as a childhood. Sorry, because I did my first graduation in English. I cannot resist the temptation to recall from the literature I studied. Bernard Shaw, quote, you have no more right to consume happiness without producing it than to consume wealth without producing it, unquote. Thank you so much for your patience. I hope I have kept within my time, and I hope if I have been a little too heady, I know it is time for dinner for many of you, and I always say when it is time for food, there should be no more food for thought. But I cannot help it, but the time is fixed by the organizers, and I am very thankful to them for calling me to address lovers of philosophy, and I find that there are 41 people in the chat. I feel quite happy about it because I had missed both the Indian Philosophical Congress and the Akhil Bharat Darshan Parishad conferences this year. And this was something that was working in my mind. And I wanted to share it. I got the opportunity. Thanks, Professor Das, Professor Rao, Professor Maharana. I can say Professor Ranjit Ghosh there. Thank you, everyone. It has been nice. I am able to see some of my old colleagues It is wonderful
Okay.
to me. Thank you so much.
Okay, thanks so much, Professor Seshadri, for presenting a very thought-provoking and illuminating talk on spiritualism, human relations, and personal ethics. Really, it is a very new topic for all of us. It is very interesting also to listen. In your sir, in your entire talk, you have focused how spiritualism happens to extend the level of consciousness and which strengthens human relations, brings clarity in thought and action, and creates transparency in character, in duty, and which teaches the sense of gratitude in every sphere of relationship. It also helps us to overcome all kinds of dilemma. Sir, I don't want to explore all the things that you have spoke. Professor Pramod Kumar Das is with us. May I request Professor Pramod Kumar Das to present a brief synopsis on the talk of Professor Seshadri. Professor Pramod Kumar Das.
Namaskar to all of you. It was a very beautiful and wonderful talk. Professor Seshadri, as he has done his master degree in both the subjects, philosophy and literature, we all really appreciate his command over language and command over thought. Thought due to philosophy and the literature due to his MA in English. Thank you, sir. In his entire talk, Professor Seshadri tried to make a division between materialism and spiritualism, and by that way he made a distinction between human relation and human relationship. Today, if we think that man is successful, it is because of his success in material prosperity. Professor Seshadri very beautifully spoke about the role of money or wealth, position, chair, power, and that is the flow of materialism. And also very beautifully spoke about spiritualism, that spiritualism leads to relationship and materialism leads to relation. I shall speak on one thing in my own language, that birds of the same feather flock together. Two plants or many plants, they grow in a common place very happily without having any problem from each other. Animals live together, birds flock together, but two human beings can't live, even not husband and wife, even not two brothers, even not father and son. It is because man is rational. It is because man is rational. It is because man knows how to rationalize, how to pass reasons for his distinctive existence. That I am distinct, I am superior, what is my benefit, how can I scale better than others. Comparison, sense of comparison, and in philosophy we can call it ego, egocentric consciousness. So spiritualism teaches us to go beyond. That the possibility of going beyond is only human possibility. Similarly, to become egocentric is also a human possibility. Human mind is capable of both. The one capability is it can be egocentric, and the other capacity is, other possibility is, it can go beyond. So the attitude of going beyond is spiritualism. So in case of a relation, Professor Seshadri very well described what is relation, that it is contextual, it is based upon the principle of a give and take. Um, so many things, that if you give, I shall give. If you help, I shall help. That means it is not grounded. It is contextual. It is dependent. It is relations are relative. It is relative to conditions, relative to context, relative to many factors. But relationship is not relative. Relationship is integral. So when plants grow together, there is a relationship between the plants. Therefore, they grow together without any problem. Rather, they help each other to grow. Animals live together in that way, but when human beings live together, they can't live because they have this instrument, that is mind. So we can make the best use of our mind. We have to direct our mind to go beyond, to reach the level of higher level of consciousness. And very beautifully, Professor Seshadri spoke about Sri Aurobindo's philosophy. That is the philosophy of transformation. It is only possible in human being. That by our effort, by our education, by our spirituality, we can transform our existence, our status of existence from imperfection to perfection. And that is the goal of life. So, the topic was spirituality, human relation, and personal ethics. So, whether we are just living a life of relation, or we are developing a sense of relationship, that depends upon our philosophy, that depends upon our understanding of life, that depends upon our worldview, that depends upon our faith in God, that depends upon our gratitude, sense of gratitude. The attitude of gratitude is very important. It is not that I am grateful to my father, or I am grateful to my teacher. I should be grateful to everything, even to the plant, even to the nature, even to every, I am, on which I am dependent. By any way, I should remain grateful. This learning should start from at home. Our mothers should teach us how to remain grateful to the nature, how to be grateful to the animals, plants, to friends, to your teachers, to your relatives, to the seniors, even to the juniors, even to the juniors. I have seen in so many colleges, whenever we do something in favor of our principal becomes very grateful. He becomes very happy, and he expresses that yes, I am grateful to you. So the expression is also very important. That attitude of gratitude makes us spiritual. That means spirituality means the sense of identification. That I am identified with the nature. I am identified with myself. I am identified with everybody. So there is no sense of the other. There is no other for me. I am in everything and I am in everybody, in everything and everybody is with me. That is the sense of identification. But it grows gradually. In the initial stage, in the state of ignorance, I may be identified with my body, that is materialism. Then I may be identified with my mind. This is also another crisis. And the highest identification, I am identified with myself. So when I am identified with my body, I say that I am this body. So when this is my knowledge, that knowledge will be reflected in my action, in my feelings, and also in my relation with others. Because I think I am body, therefore I shall run after the pleasures, run after the comforts, run after success. When I think that I am mind, then I shall think that my reason is better, my argument is better. I am superior to others. I am superior to others. But the moment I think that I am that soul, I am myself, then only there is no distinction between myself and the others. That is relationship. Relationship means that intimacy between, of chains which are related to each other. It is not dependent on any condition. It is an autonomy. It is an autonomy which stands by its own principle. It is not dependent. It is not contextual. It cannot be moderated. It cannot be changed. It is there. It is the ground. So, how can we be related with others? That depends upon the philosophical grounding, how I am related to myself. If I am not related to myself, if I am a foreigner to my own self, if I am not identified with myself, then how can I be identified with my other? How can I be identified with my wife, my children, my sister, my parents? So charity begins at home, therefore the self-knowledge begins from the self. Yes, I am not this body, I am not this mind, I am not my position, power, there, etc. I am the self. I am the person, I am that woman. That person is the productive person, that person is the self-conscious person, and that is self-consciousness when I have established a positive relationship with myself, then only I am qualified to have a positive relationship with others. Therefore I always say, you are a selfish person, then be truly a selfish person. But you are not truly a selfish person because you are also selfish to yourself. That means you are also not a friend of yours. If you are selfish, at least to be a friend of yourself. If you are not a friend of yourself, then you cannot be a friend of others. From this knowledge, we can develop our personalities. Personalities means my conclusion, my worldview, my choice, my understanding of morality. Yes, I may respect others, I may respect others' view, but that does not mean I shall disrespect my own view, my own ethics, my own views. Because if I do not stand, I cannot be accounted by others, and I cannot make relationship with others. So Guru and Guna both are equally important. The nucleus existence and the total existence is one and the same, because I am part of the whole. was very comprehensive. Sir spoke of so many things, but basically Sir spoke of what is things about materialism and spiritualism and human relation and human relationship, and he spoke about personal ethics, and he very beautifully made a relation between these three. I enjoyed this talk, and today we finished, and he is grateful to Professor Seshadri for his wonderful teaching in this session. Thank you, sir.
Okay, thanks so much, Professor Pramod Das, for briefing the talk of Professor Seshadri. You have also put an observation and understanding with the subject matter that Professor Seshadri spoke. Now it's time for interaction. May I request Professor Dr. K. Omnaran Rao to carry on the interactive session. Over to Professor Rao. Over to Professor Rao.
Namaskar everybody, namaskar sirs, namaskar. Thank you Professor Seshadri for a very nice talk. It was really wonderful. So the talk was very beautifully summarized by Professor Das. So as long as a man bases his relationship on the material comforts, bases his relationship, his link is lost. Seshadri sure, his link is lost. Yes, he's not there. Well, we have to wait for some time for him to return.
Professor Rao.
No.
Okay, please continue because Professor Ranjit Ghosh and other professors there, they will put their observation. Okay, whenever Professor Seshadri will come, then he will answer the questions.
Well. But still, let us wait because it is for him to answer. So you have to, whatever observations that will be made, he has to clarify those. He has to respond. So we have to wait for some time. If he doesn't, some network issue, then we'll carry on this session without him. But we have to wait for half a minute at least because it is ultimately Professor Seshadri who has to respond finally. So let us wait. Professor Das, please ring Professor Seshadri. What has happened to him? Why the connectivity is lost? Okay. Let me see. Seshadri sir. Well. I'm trying.
Ranjit sir.
Yes.
Sir, you speak two lines about this discussion.
Okay. Had he been present, it would have been better.
No. Professor Seshadri has joined.
Yes.
Professor Seshadri has joined. Well, thank you, sir. Some network issue
I'm
maybe.
very sorry, and it was my mistake. My hand slipped.
No, it happens, sir. In the virtual mode, these things happen. Okay, it's fine that you are back.
I apologize for it.
No. It happens in the virtual platform. It's nice that you're back again. So Professor Das has summarized your account, whatever you spoke. But one thing that I make out from the entire talk, that if you base the relationship on some on material prosperity or on give and take, so it is temporary. It is never enduring, because once the work is done, once the goal is achieved, the relationship is also broken. That is never lasting. But if you base the relationship on value, it's based on some unconditional trust, unconditional love, it's based on respect for each other, such a relationship is enduring, and that relationship will last long. It is only in such a relationship that one can think of elevating to higher in the ladder to transcend to what is called spiritual realm. Not spirituality here doesn't mean that we go in a godly way. Not that. Being in human conditions, we understand others. We are with others. We are there with others. We share the feeling of others. So we serve others. Because the basis is value, the basis is not material comfort. As long as the relationship is on some material comfort, it is going to break, it is not lasting. But all relationship whatsoever, you may be or you may not be, Professor Seshadri has pointed out, you may not be knowing a person, but still you can serve that person. So that is unconditional love that we can see for others. Yes, Professor Das was saying that we have to see ourselves in others. It's only then we can think of a non-dual world where we can really serve, because in serving others, we feel that we are serving our own self. So it is only then that is a sort of transcendence to a sort of spiritual realm. And one more thing that was saying that happiness, some way or other, you are trying to put happiness at the center, because much of the relationship center around happiness. I was also speaking on this issue in a lecture 2 days back, wherein I said the happiness of a person should lie in the happiness of others. At least we can grow seeing our own family happy, and seeing the happiness in the family, we can think of our own happiness. So in small ways, we can grow up to what we call moral and establishing a very good moral order or a spiritual order, as we say. So for this, self-effort is required, and it doesn't require much of energy. We can do, it's a possibility, but the problem is we confine ourselves to our own selves and do not expand. Our self doesn't expand. We confine ourselves to our own individual body. There lies the problem. If we expand ourselves to the family, first of all, then to the society, and then to the cosmos. So if you take the theory of expansion of self from the own individual body to the family, to the society, and to the cosmos, then we can think of really establishing a moral order first, and then a spiritual order, where there is no other, there is union all the way around. Now, I don't see any question in the chat box. We have with us Dr. Ranjit Ghosh, sir. I welcome you, sir. Please make your observations.
At the outset, let me congratulate Professor Seshadri for his nice talk and joining our fraternity, the Darshanik Satsang that we are undergoing these days during these days of pandemic. So thank you, sir. You have joined us. Now I have one clarification from you and another question. Now the thing is, when we are making it in this way, spirituality, human relations, and personal ethics. So would you like to, maybe you have mentioned this, I could not get it, that first we should inculcate these characteristics of personal ethics in us, like take the case of empathy or selflessness or loyalty, all these things. And these things will lead to a good human relations. That means a good communication we can establish with others. Our human relations will improve. And in the process, we will arrive at the spiritual level of experience or spirituality. So I suggest that it should be other way around. First, personal ethics comes first, then human relations, and then spirituality. So this is what you feel. You please apprise us. This is one thing. And another very direct question is this: that you are talking about auditing. Okay, auditing of pleasure is possible, but auditing of happiness is not possible. I am bringing the explanation of Dalai Lama again. And Dalai Lama said that the entire Buddhist philosophy rests on the understanding of emotion, with which our science cannot help us. So auditing, so happiness is an emotion, but pleasure is a feeling. So we can make an audit of pleasure, but I think I'm afraid we cannot make an auditing of happiness. How do you react to this two
I'll take the
things?
second question first. Thanks for
Okay.
your observation. What I said was we need to account and audit in a relationship, not happiness. Because I know happiness is not something that can ever be quantified. Never. No individual, however happy he is or she is, happiness is not something that can be quantified. For instance, when I passed my metric, I was happy. When I passed my first year, second year, third year, final year, I was happy. But the happiness in each case was a different kind of happiness. I will never be able to say whether I was happier or the most happiest when I did my MA. I won't be able to say that. But at every level, when you find something that you feel like, yes, this is worth it and this has added value to my life, that is happiness. It is not that I was satisfied with the metric. Yes, as a boy, I was satisfied as an adolescent. But as an adult, when I grew up, when I got married, I was happy. When my child was born, I was happy. I became a grandfather, I was happy. When my daughter passed her matriculation, I danced with those kids on the street. What I'm saying is happiness can be expressed in any form emotionally. But happiness can never be measured. Every time you feel happy, if there is that continuity of even a memory of that event, that itself will make you happy. That's why when I came back to the last part of my talk, when I talked of gratitude, I feel so happy that I have such great educators, not merely teachers. Many of them are no more now. Very few are left. But still, I happen to meet them. I go and meet them every occasion possible, or at least on the phone. Pardon? Sorry. 2 days back, I talked to my first head of department when I was in the Department of English. She felt so happy that I called her. She is not able to move out. What I'm saying is, every instance I talk to her, it's a moment of happiness. So happiness is something I agree with you. It's beyond audit. It is beyond audit. No, not even I can audit at my level. There's no question of auditing from others. What I talked of was the only way to know whether a relationship is really good is by applying the principle of trust. Just as in all other audits, there are some rules and regulations. Even in relationship, there can be no fixed rules, but there is one value, that is trust. A relationship is lost, I said when I compared the two, that a relationship, once it fails, it's not because it did not succeed. It failed because of the lack of trust or the absence of trust. So we mistook what was just a relation for relationship. It was not relationship, it was only a relationship. But how do I apply that standard of trust? If you take a Guru-Shishya Parampara, or a teacher-student or a parent-child relationship, it may fail sometimes. Sometimes my parents may not be as per my expectations, just as I may not be as a teacher meeting the expectations of my students. But does it fail? Does it fail forever? The answer is no. Many times, Sachin Tendulkar cannot hit a century all the time. He has also got out on duck. Does it mean he's a failure? The answer is no. Because we still trust his skills. We still trust certain human beings in our life, just as we trust our dog at home. We trust that animal. I don't know whether we will trust a cat or a lion because it cannot be trusted entirely. They may show on the TV. So the trust is a sentiment that exists only between individuals. It cannot go beyond that. And as I know, that's why the ethic of trust defines relationship. And with every encounter, if it is unadulterated, it is unconditional, I use the term, it is spontaneous, and it is working on the principle of mutuality. Not mutuality, mutual. Two-way. I contribute to that person's welfare, happiness. That person contributes to my happiness, may not be in actuality, but the fact is, I believe my happiness is in his happiness is in my happiness. If that principle works, the trust remains. Happiness only multiplies. But there can be no hard and fast rule how it can be done except by the degree of trust and the degree of continuity over time. That is why today I trusted my teachers. Not every one of them, but selective. I was selective. They were also selective. Some of them literally adopted me. Not only me, many other students also. So that continues. I don't think it will, close with my death. They say it's a lifetime. I hope I have answered that. So there can be no hard and fast rule about measuring happiness. Yes, it's a feeling. And you feel, your mind feels that you are at peace with yourself when you are happy. Your mind feels happy because, yes, here is this person I can trust. Without trust, society cannot survive. Today, all the problems in our society is just the lack of trust. We are suspicious about everyone. Whether it is religion, whether it is citizenship, we are able to trust anybody. I don't know whether we can only blame the politicians, we have to blame ourselves for the kind of rulers. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Seshadri. But one thing comes to my mind: how do you place trust? How do you see trust in a utility-based relationship vis-a-vis value-based relationship? How do you see this? Trust in a utility-based relationship. How do you see trust in a utility-based relationship vis-a-vis a value-based relationship? How do you see trust?
Trust on value-based relationship, not utility-based. I have answered it in my paper. But if it is utility-based, it means use when you need and throw when not needed. Hire when you need and fire when not needed. I called it in Babaya Hindi Matlabi somewhere. That will not work. That is because there is some selfish interest involved. Whereas it is value-based, it cannot be selfish. It has got to be selfless. And by value, I listed some values. It goes with that happiness, excellence, beauty, truth, etc. But if the value is profit, then it has got to be limited. It cannot be trust. It can be only utility.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. So we cannot have trust coherently moving on in a utility-based relationship. So it's only in a value-based relationship that we can talk of trust.
In utility, it will be shortly. So
It is shortly, and nearly trust has no place in it.
yeah, no, it is not spontaneous. It is not spontaneous conditional.
Yes. Thank you. We have Alok Chen.
Alok,
Yeah.
Namaskar, Alokji.
You're welcome, sir. You're welcome.
Yeah. I have come for you, Dr. Seshadri. We have not met for such a long time. You refer to Darshan Parishad, IPC, and all these places where you were regular.
I have learned from
We
you.
used to meet and talk and interact on many occasions. But this time I saw your presentation, so I rushed to it.
I am happy about it.
But yeah, so I am very happy to see you reflecting upon the state of relationships. But you know that my perspective is a bit different. My perspective, I must say right in the beginning, I question this whole spiritualism. Not because, as you said, it is not religiosity, but still we have got a tradition of thousands of years of spirituality. But as we look into the state of affairs today, I find that it has not been very effective. The first question comes, why is it so? The second question is, and I see in our philosophical circles, and you know my orientation very well, that most of the time our philosophical discussion is centered around individuals and also on a very thin identity of individuals as not as body, not as mind, but only as soul or something like Atma. So I think that should we wait for becoming self-realized souls, sthit pragyas, before we enter into the real relationships, what you call. This is the second question. Now I come to the third question, and this is the question that relates to the socio-economic model of progress, which we, along with the world, have accepted, and what we call it global capitalist society or the model of global capitalism. And in his remark on this, now it is very famous, we remember Marx as saying that in the higher stages of capitalism, everything melts away, including the relationships. So the problem of what you pointed out very well, that the distinction between relations and relationships. So why there is an increase in relations and why there is so much decrease in relationships, trusting relationships? Is it not related to the capitalist social order, economic order we are pursuing? And unless and until we make a check on it and try to create a moral social order, is there any hope, or is this talk of spiritualism sufficient to lead us to relationships, what you call? Can there not be a humanistic way of looking at these things? Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Professor Alok. I was expecting questions on these lines from you, and I'm very happy that you raised it. If you recall, one of the statements I made, submissions I made in my talk was, we cannot talk of spiritualism or God to an empty stomach. That was the exact word I used. Spiritualism does not put bread into the tummy of any individual. So if we have to talk of a spiritual awakening in individuals, I am not talking of the spiritual awakening in the ancient, like in the ancient times or the times. It is self-awakening within myself as an individual person to be responsible for myself. If I am not responsible for myself, I cannot take self-responsibility. I may be a product of, say, for example, so-called illegitimate progeny of somebody. Parents just have fun, throw the child on the street. It happens not only among poor people, it happens among well-to-do people. A child that is physically or mentally challenged is also thrown away somewhere. This is happening, and this is across the board. What I'm trying to say is, if I take responsibility for my own welfare, happiness, I may be born under any circumstance, poverty, affluence. I may be born in a middle class, a lower or upper middle class. I may be born as a tribal in a ancient hamlet, wherever I am. But the fact is, I need a true spiritual being, in the sense, I am not talking of saints. I am not talking of the ancient gurus who are all well endowed. Because one thing I am very clear about it is, we cannot have a segregated society. We cannot have a guide who is prejudiced in any way against humanity. A guru or a guide has to be open about everyone in society. Even when you talk of the capitalist model, per se, I don't know whether it was bad going by the feudalistic time, because the feudal lord took care of their subjects and the subjects were loyal to them, because there was trust. That failed when it comes to the post-Marxian society. What Marx said is true, his philosophy is acceptable, but whether the technique of achieving that can work now is an issue. So capitalist model is fine so long as it doesn't make us selfish. So long as it doesn't make us narrow-minded. So long as it keeps only self-interest above everything else. This I had talked in my paper. What I said was relationship is higher, it's at a higher level because it is beyond relations. So the point I would like to make is whatever model you follow, today the world is following the kind of global capitalism that is going on. Yes, it has affected a large number of people, large number of societies. People who are less qualified, less professionally qualified for various reasons are unable to grow. That's not the case. People who are well qualified even find themselves unable to go further. That is why frustrations come. So unless there is humanization of, number one, culture, humanization of education, humanization of individuals and families, societies and communities, there is no way society can progress. There is no way exploitation can stop because I feel I am important. All my ahankar, my ego, my sense of dignity overrides everyone else's dignity. That is wrong. And there are capitalists who have done a lot of good things. I use the word seva or service. How many of us know that the concept of Provident Fund had its root in the Tata Group? We condemn the Tatas. There are people who condemn the Tatas. How many people know that they are the people who can all not the present governments, please? Very little. I use the word Miri and Piri from Sikhism. I use these two terms. The only way I can improve my lot is number one, by knowledge to survive in this world, the wisdom to guide me so that I love everyone like humanity, I humanize myself. Mere professional education is not going to humanize me. It can give me knowledge, it can give me skills, but it cannot give me the kind of understanding, reasoning and objectives that I get from wisdom, which must come from an enlightened mind because the enlightened mind accepts everyone. It doesn't exclude anyone. The enlightened mind treats everyone as equal. Human dignity is always recognized, accepted, promoted. That is why I said spiritualism in that respect. It has nothing to do with metaphysics. It has nothing to do with religion. It is beyond both. But in all this, please note, we cannot talk of philosophy, religion, metaphysics, or spirituality to a man who is totally famished. There is no way it can be done. If I am a human being, when I cook, I will cook for two more others, share with two more others. Maybe my building watchman or my servant. If every family feeds one more person, I think the world can overcome the deficit of trust that is happening now. But if the kind of capitalism we have now continues unregulated, uncontrolled, unbridled the way it is going on, and I feel yes, the time will come when there will be no trust left at all. Khalil Gibran had written somewhere, I have read somewhere that it will be wonderful. You have something to give. I don't remember the exact words. It will be wonderful if I have something to give and there is somebody to take. But it will be utter misery if I am there to give, but there is nobody to take. I hope, Alokji, I have explained my position. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Seshadri, for your response.
Thank you, Professor Seshadri. Now you have, I must say, humanized your spirituality. Somewhat coming to my point of view. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. It was nice interacting with you all. Let me say, I don't know how much people have got from me. I have shared what I thought I must share, what I knew. But I always say, take it on merit. I don't expect anybody to agree with me. You may disagree, I will learn. But what I say is not the only thing that is to say.
But Professor Seshadri, we are having a big problem here. Our social order is running on one track, and we want to run our personal ethics on another track. Now there is a mismatch, a conflict here. The capitalist social order is based on greed, on selfishness, on avarice, on competition, and all these things. And still we think about having some sort of humanizing attitude. Even in the example of Tata's, Birla, and all these people, they spend their profits on social charity. But how they earn their profits, that is also to be seen. And all are not Tatas. That is also very important. But thank you very much, because I see such a conflict between this personal ethics and the social ethics, and that probably that irritates me. Thank you.
It is there, but my point is, if our education system changes without just telling stories to children from childhood, if your families, individuals, and the children are brought up with spiritual training, I think at least in the next 50 to 100 years, we can see some change in society. The economic model will not last long, what we have now. Because nature gives only when you give back to nature. If you own everything in nature, it is going to snatch it from you, and that is going to happen. This is my personal view. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Professor Seshadri and Dr. Alok Tandon. One thing I'm not clear with Dr. Tandon, when he says in a capitalist format, there is a melting down of relationship. Rather, I see there is a more of a relationship growing on capitalist format. The neglected ones, they come together because more of relations, they grow in a neglected condition. All those who are rejected, who are neglected, they come together because people are more together when they are poor. Once they get elevated, when they have the riches, they break away. But in a capitalistic format, when you say a certain class of people having an advantageous position, well, but all those, the proletariat class, the working class, those who are neglected, well, they are more in a relationship to fight against the structure itself. So there I see a relationship, a sort of emotional relationship growing within to fight against the very format of capitalism. How do you say this, sir?
It's about me or Professor Tandon?
Sir, it is mostly up to Tandon, sir, but again...
So let him respond, and if necessary, I'll speak up.
Problem there in the capitalist structure.
I think today is floor for Dr. Seshadri. It is not my turn to respond. I will respond in some other occasion, I think. It is a good question, but the relationship of camaraderie among proletariat and the dissolution of human relationships, these are the two different dimensions, and we will talk it later sometime.
I just want to say that the only way we can bridge this gap is by education and making good quality education equitable, available, accessible to every child in our country.
Yes.
That's the only way.
Yes.
I have Vrindavan Rath, sir. He wants to say something. Welcome, Vrindavan Rath, sir. Sir, please make your observation, sir. Welcome, sir. Welcome, sir. Vrindavan Rath, sir.
We many and I am reminded
Sir, your voice is not clear. Brindana sir, your voice is not clear.
Yes. When he told that, when he told, poverty people cannot think of girl, while I was a student in BA. Is it audible or not? Is it audible?
Now audible. Now audible.
Now you are audible.
Now audible.
Now, all right. What I meant to say is that I was taught by Professor Satyavadi Mishra, who was direct student of Professor Radhakrishnan in Banaras University. And he always used to talk to us that when you are hungry, you cannot do philosophy. Similarly, Professor Seshadri told that poverty-stricken people or poor people cannot think of God. Right. When you want to do philosophy or to think deeply on anything, you must have a very good body or having a good mind. So, and lastly, in interaction with Professor Tandon, as Professor Seshadri told, that it is actually education which is very, very basic, fundamental factor to change everything what we are talking in the realm of philosophy. Unless and until that kind of education is imparted, we cannot see, we cannot understand the concepts about spirituality and all that we are talking, or humanism of spirituality. Another observation I am telling that there is difference between spirituality and spiritualism. Spiritualism, we are very frequently using for spirituality. Spiritualism is the possibility of communication with souls of dead people. We should be aware of it. We are talking, of course, of spirituality, but we must keep it in your mind that there is difference between spirituality and spiritualism. And really, a very good talk we listened to Seshadri, and also our organizers like Professor Pramod Das and Professor Maharana and Professor Rao. All are thankful, and thanks to all of you. Nice.
Thank you so much. Thanks, sir.
Well, we don't have any more questions. If anybody wants to raise any issue, any question, they are free to unmute themselves and make their observation or seek a clarification or pose a question. I'll wait for half a minute. If nobody is unmuting, then I'll hand over the further proceedings to be carried on by Dr. Kailas Mahana, sir. Well, I don't see anybody unmuting. So over to Dr. Kailas Mahana, sir, for carrying on the further proceedings.
Actually, it's time to wind up this session. Now it's time to propose vote of thanks or gratitude to our respected speaker, Professor Seshadri, and our other learned participants of this evening. Okay, over to Professor Dr. K. Omanan Rao to propose a very hearty vote of thanks to Professor Seshadri and all the learned participants. Over to Professor.
Yes, at first I would like to thank the speaker, Professor Seshadri, for accepting the invitation. So he joined our family last month, and he agreed to deliver a talk, and we are very much thankful to him. And he delivered a very good talk. He tried to make a blend of our way of living, connecting spirituality and how to make our living better, how to make a society where the emotions flow in harmony. So these are the aspects that he touched. But he sees a contradiction in the society where we are more often grown by the utility-based relation, and he advises us to come out of that sort of relation and to walk in the path of a comprehensive relationship based on some value, so that it would really sound as a relationship to last long and strong. So that is the sort of relationship that he wants to, that he advises to have, to make a relationship stronger by basing everything on trust, on some value, on some unconditional faith and love. So thank you very much, sir, for your nice lecture, for the thought that you have shared with us. and it was really an interesting talk. And I should thank Professor Pramod Das for providing a synopsis to this, and also thank Dr. Alok Tandon, Professor Dr. Ranjit Ghosh sir, and all others who took part in the interaction session, because that added value to this talk, and the responses that Professor Seshadri gave, they were really beautiful and very nice, and we have learned from him, and really he made a very good blend of spiritualism, human relationship, and personal morality. So I should thank him for the time that he has contributed to be with us, to be connected with us. He's there with us. He's a senior faculty member. We seek his blessings so that our philosophy family grows, and we'll be inviting him very often so that we can be will be enriched by his thoughts. And as young scholars, we'd like to learn from him more and more. So we'd love to have lots of support from Professor Seshadri. So I thank him very much for his presence today, and also for the lecture. Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. My greetings and best wishes to all of you. And may your children, your students, your family, everyone be healthy and happy throughout, and enjoy that sense of happiness.
Thank you,
That's all
sir.
I can pray for you.
Thank you, sir. This is the connectedness that your lecture was on, and hope we all be connected that way spiritually. Thank you very much, sir. So I should thank our admin, Professor Pramod Kumar Das, for being the man behind this webinar, and I thank all those connected through this virtual platform for making this webinar so meaningful. We had many new faces today, and I thank all of them for being connected. And I request these all those professors or scholars who have joined today to be with us, to join every Sunday, so that we can learn from you. And I say Philosophy Family is a group for mutual learning. We want to learn from each other. And I also request if there are speakers who can really share their knowledge in the family, they are welcome, they are invited. So there are few new faces that I see, and I request them, if they want to join our family, they are welcome. We want more of more and more people, good people in the philosophy fraternity. So yes. One more thing, there is so I should thank everybody, even our coordinator Kailas Mahana sir, for introducing the speaker and all that. One important, and I should also thank Brindavan Ras sir for making his observations. So I should thank everybody for being connected in this virtual mode, and making this webinar so lively and so successful. It's an important announcement that Philosophy Family was born on the 17th of July. Actually, it's born as a WhatsApp group. It is a mastermind of Professor Pramod Kumar Das to bring the people, the students, the intellectuals together during the pandemic. And suddenly a thought came, now we should not be just confined to this WhatsApp group. We should carry on, because we are taking online classes now through the online mode. We should interact at a national level by taking the papers that are taught to the students in the university syllabus. So with that aim in mind, we started having the first webinar by inviting Professor P.K. Mahapatra sir, very senior professor in the state, and the first lecture in the family was delivered on 28th of July. So with this, we think that is the foundational stone of this webinar series that we are having. So we are celebrating 28th of July this year as the annual day. All are welcome to join on Wednesday. It is on Wednesday at 6:30 p.m. So we wish you to join this annual day celebration. On that day, we are thinking, based on the webinars, we have designed a book, edited a book, and Professor Seshadri also guided us in how to have that book. We have titled the book as Philosophical Reflections based on the articles that were submitted by different academicians So a total of 25 25 articles have been compiled together in the form of philosophical reflections. On that day, this book would be released, and we have other things to do. People will be invited to make their own observations so that we as philosophy family will grow high and make philosophy